Let's go down these settings, there's not too many of them, and explain what each one does. So under contact settings, it says enable the personal contact form by default for new users. I'm going to uncheck this because it feels like defaulting to no contact form makes a little bit more sense, and users should turn on that setting as needed. We can change the name of anonymous users. Most of the time, this would be used for thematic purposes to bring the name of your anonymous users in line with your overall theme. We can also set a different role for the administrator role. By default, it's administrator, but we can select any role that we have. As we mentioned earlier, the administrator role gets all permissions by default. And here's the section that we're most interested in right now. Registration and cancellation. Who can register accounts? Administrators only, visitors, but administrator approval is required. So what we want is administrators only. This will prevent users from being able to register an account with us. This checkbox is no longer relevant. Require email verification when a visitor creates an account. If administrators are the only ones that can create an account, this will no longer come into play. But if we had it as visitors but with administrator approval, or just visitors, disabling this would allow a user to register and it would immediately log them in and give them whatever permissions authenticated users have. In some use cases, this can be a great workflow for a site, particularly when you want users to be able to begin to interact on the site and you just need some identification for them to get started. But most sites require email verification as a way of reducing spam. Spam bots can still verify email, but fewer of them are able to do that. Enable password strength indicator. We saw this when we initially created our site, and if we had visitors selected but require email verification turned off, then it would allow the user to supply their own password. When they did, it would show them how strong or weak their password was. The when canceling a user account setting comes into play when you cancel an account. So if we looked at the user that we just created, I opened up people in a new tab, and we edit their account. At the very bottom, we can click cancel account. Now over here in the account settings, it shows three options. Disable the account and keep its content, disable the account and unpublish its content, so therefore making all of the content they've created no longer visible on the public site, or delete the account and make its content belong to the anonymous user. So none of these actually deletes the content that they created, but it either unpublishes it or assigns it to a different user. Whichever one of these is selected will be selected by default when we get to this cancellation form. However, as it says right here, if a user has permission, they'll be able to override this default when it comes to canceling the account. Because we're an administrator and have all permissions, we're one of those users. I'm going to scroll down. The notification email address is an email address that's used as the from when sending any email related to user accounts. Down here you can see all of the emails that Drupal sends out related to users, and so when any of these get sent out, this would be the email address that shows up as the from, and therefore when somebody responds to it, it would go to that email address. By default, this is going to be the site email address which we set up in our initial configuration screen for Drupal. If this is set, then emails will also go out to this email address whenever somebody registers an account and their account requires administrator approval. And then down here, you can adjust the content and subject lines of each of these emails that went out. So we saw this welcome awaiting approval. Thank you for registering at Magnificent. Your application for an account is currently pending approval. And then when the account was activated, we also saw this email. So we can adjust these to fit the theme and tone of our site if we'd like. All right, I'm going to save the configuration here. So now if we are an anonymous user, and I'm going to go ahead and log out, I'll go to user/logout. And if we go back to the user page, you won't see a tab here for registering anymore.